something? Yes, of course. I apologize, but I didn't make copies of the handouts of Christian. So what I will do is I will send to the email list of the handout so that you can have it on screen. And this morning you sent a shorter version of the paper, which is what you're going to read, which will be projected on the screens. So yes, sorry, Christine.
Okay. The second speaker is Dr. Christian Pineda, the presentation director, the Stoics on identity, identification, and material constitution. Dr. Pineda, thank you very much for being here and for sharing your ideas with us. Please begin with your presentation.
So I want to start by thank you, Professor Ricardo, for inviting me to participate. It was a great motivation to get into these new topics. My background is mostly Stoic epistemology and ancient skepticism, so this is going to be my first approach to Stoic ontology. I'm aware that this draft still needs some work to do. So, but you have it, the argument is here. So I'm going to start to read. Introduction. This paper focuses on the Stoic concepts of peculiarly qualified individual and peculiar quality. These concepts were introduced to address a range of philosophical problems. In this paper, I will examine how these concepts address two problems that, in my view, deserve further attention that they have received: the epistemological problem of identification and the metaphysical problem of material constitution. In doing so, I am to elucidate certain features of this Stoic concept that I have overlooked in the scholarship. So I'm going to start with the first part, the epistemological problem of identification. The Stoics maintain that the cosmos is populated by peculiarly qualified individuals. This encompasses each living being, such as my mother, my friend's pets, and the plants in my living room. This also encompasses each natural inanimate being. Thus, each egg in the mold is a peculiarly qualified individual. What makes an individual peculiarly qualified is the possession of a peculiar quality. A peculiar quality is a unique and persistent property that ensures that each individual possesses a distinct character that sets it apart from any other individual. Accordingly, the Stoics precluded the possibility of numerically distinct individuals sharing the same peculiar quality. The central debate concerning these Stoic concepts revolves around the kind of properties that count as peculiar qualities. From the problem these concepts aim to address, we can establish at least three conditions any candidate must meet. First, the uniqueness condition. It must be a property that cannot be shared by more than one individual. Thus, being human cannot be Socrates' peculiar quality because Plato possessed it as well. Second, the persistent condition. It must be a property that an individual cannot lose without ceasing to exist. Thus, being one meter tall cannot be my nephew's peculiar quality because he can lose it, for example, by growing, without ceasing to exist. Third, the identification condition. It must be an epistemically accessible property that enables the identification of the individual over time. The main difficulty in determining the kind of properties that count as peculiar quality is that it's rather difficult to find a candidate that meets all the conditions. The Xipos' commentary on Aristotle's categories contains, as far as I know, the sole Stoic testimony providing specific examples of peculiar qualities. However, scholars contend that the Xipos' account is so evidently problematic that it cannot represent the true Stoic view. In what follows, I aim to show that the epistemic role of peculiar qualities upholds the Xipos' account. To this aim, I will begin by discussing this account and its alleged problems, and then I will examine how the Stoics deploy their concepts to address the skeptical challenges to identification. Finally, I will propose a solution to the problems of the Xipos' account. So let's begin with the Xipos' text. But in form is what is predicated in the category of essence of a plurality of numerical different things. In what does single individual differ from single individual, saying that each is numerically single? Those who solve this difficulty on the basis of peculiarly qualify that one individual is distinguished, say, by hawkiness of the nose, by blondness, by some other combination of qualities, another by snubness, boldness, or grayness of the eyes, and again another by other qualities. Don't seem to me to solve very well. This text deals with the principle of individuation. These principles explain what makes an entity numerically distinct from any other entity of the same kind. In this context, the Stoic concept of peculiarly qualified individual is dismissed as a candidate for this principle. In doing so, the Leucippus claims that an individual's peculiar quality is a combination of qualities. Moreover, this combination is limited to physical qualities, such as hawkiness of the nose, blondness, snubness, boldness, and grayness of the eyes. Therefore, each individual is peculiarly qualified to a distinct combination of physical qualities. The problem of this account is alleged failure to meet the persistent condition. Physical qualities don't seem to be the kind of qualities that persist through a lifetime, especially those mentioned in the Leucippus' account. The shape of the nose could change in an accident. One could even suffer the complete loss of the nose. Similarly, hair length and color change throughout life. Should an individual's peculiar quality be solely determined by the sum of his physical qualities, then any change in these qualities would give rise to a numerically distinct individual. Therefore, the Leucippus' account fails to account for the persistence of peculiarly qualified individuals. Well, the epistemic role of peculiar qualities. In the epistemological debate between the Stoics and the academic skeptics, the latter focused their criticism on the Stoic concept of cognitive representation. The Stoics resisted this criticism by invoking their concept of peculiarly qualified individual and peculiar quality. Let us see how they did so. According to the Stoics, cognitive representations allow one to grasp external objects in such a way that one cannot make wrong judgments about them. Against the Stoics, the academics argue that putative cognitive representation cannot provide us with this infallible knowledge. They challenge the Stoics by appealing to qualitatively identical objects, for example, identical twins. Since these objects supposedly share all the same properties, the cognitive representation arising from them would be subjectively indistinguishable. Consequently, identification judgments based on this representation could be wrong. For instance, a putative cognitive representation of Pollux wouldn't allow me to infallibly judge that he is the one standing in front of me, as this representation could lead me to mistake him for his twin brother Castor. The Stoics first rejected the possibility of qualitatively identical individuals. As previously remarked, the Stoics held that no pair of objects can share the same peculiar quality. Hence, even highly similar individuals possess qualities that differentiate them from each other. Secondly, they claim that a representation must grasp the peculiar qualities of its object to be cognitive. Subtext 2. They hold that this representation is capable of precisely grasping objects and is stamped with other peculiarities in a craftsmanlike way. For just as the sun rings always stamp all their markings precisely on the wax, so those who have knowledge of the object should notice other peculiarities. This text indicates that a cognitive representation of Pollux must grasp his peculiar quality. Consequently, any representation that could lead to mistaking for custom cannot be truly cognitive. Regardless of how closely two pairs of objects resemble each other, as long as they possess distinct peculiar qualities, our cognitive representation of these objects are distinguishable. Thus, The Stoics showed that the identification judgments based on genuine cognitive representation remains infallible despite the academic challenge. The phenomenon of identification lies at the core of this debate. In challenging Stoic epistemology, the academics offer counterexamples showing that hypothetic cognitive representations could lead us to misidentification. In these counterexamples, the sage, the ideal epistemic agent, is first presented with one object and then confronted with another highly similar, for example, identical twins or part of X. Subsequently, the sage is tasked with identifying whether the second object is numerically identical to the first. The academics concluded that the sage cannot infallibly identify the object in these skeptical scenarios. In response to the academic criticism, the Stoics presented counterexample featuring subjects with trained identification abilities who could differentiate between highly similar objects. Let us examine these counterexamples. Text 3. I don't agree with Democritus and reject him rather because of what is taught most clearly by the more sophisticated natural philosophers, that there are properties peculiar to each individual thing. Let us assume those hillbilly brothers of old who were twins were as similar as is claimed. Do you really think that they were identical too? They were recognized in public, not at home, not by strangers, but by their own family. Don't we see that it's a familiar phenomenon that those whom we never thought we could tell apart, we can with practice so easily tell apart that they don't appear similar to the slightest degree? Just as a mother is able to tell her twins apart due to the experience of her eyes, so you will tell them apart once you have become adapted. Do you see how in the proverb X exhibit similarly with each other? Nonetheless, we gather that on Delos, when was still prosperous, there were people who used to breed lots of hens commercially. When they had examined an egg, they were able to say which hen had laid it. So the first counterexample shows that while strangers may struggle to differentiate between identical twins, their mothers and relatives can readily distinguish them. The other highlights the remarkable ability of dairy and chicken farmers to differentiate between seemingly identical eggs. In both cases, the Stoics argue that training is what allows one to develop such keen identification abilities. Without them, one couldn't grasp the peculiar qualities of highly similar objects and, hence, couldn't entertain cognitive representations of them. Thus, the Stoics argue that the sage and anyone else can learn to infallibly identify the object in each skeptical scenario. The Stoic view on the phenomenon of identification supports the Xippus's account. The counterexample presented indicate that physical qualities are the relevant ones in both identification and misidentification cases. Identical twins seem qualitatively identical regarding their physical qualities, where Dylan formers rely on physical qualities to distinguish between eggs. Additionally, since cognitive representation grasps only the perceptible qualities of their objects, peculiar qualities must be perceptible. The physical qualities mentioned in the Xippus's account are indeed perceptible. Thus, one identifies an individual through a cognitive representation that grasps the complex combination of physical qualities that ground his distinctive character. As I have shown, the epistemic role of peculiar qualities within the debate with the academics is consistent with the Xippus's account. This gives us reason to consider that this account could have represented the true Stoic view. That said, let us turn to address its alleged failure to account for the persistence of peculiarly qualified individuals. So the problem of persistence. If peculiar qualities are identical to sums of physical qualities, peculiarly qualified individuals cannot persist through physical changes. Hence, we are compelled to deny this identity claim. Instead, the relation that obtains between a peculiar quality and a sum of physical qualities must allow the peculiar qualities to persist despite changes in its constituents. I mean the individual's physical qualities. Thus, an individual peculiar quality must be taken as a constituted whole, which is irreducible to a mere sum of physical qualities. My hypothesis, and this is my working hypothesis, is that this kind of relation mirrors the one the Stoics discussed when addressing the problem of material constitution. A traffic jam provides a helpful analogy for understanding this relation. Each car contributes to the overall congestion, but the traffic jam itself doesn't depend on any specific car. One could replace, remove, or add some cars, and the traffic jam might still persist. This analogy highlights how an individual's peculiar quality doesn't depend on any specific physical quality, and what it cannot be simply broken down into a sum of its constituent elements. The phenomenon of identification supports the idea that peculiar qualities are irreducible to mere sums of physical qualities. It's a familiar fact that we can identify the same individual despite significant physical changes over time. For instance, mothers can readily identify their children despite changes in height, weight, hair color, and facial features. This likely stems from the fact that individual's peculiar quality, what being unique and epistemically accessible, persists through his lifetime despite his physical qualities change. This suggests that in identifying a peculiarly qualified individual, we grasp the constituted whole in a gestalt manner rather than analyzing its constituents. Indeed, mothers can readily identify their children, yet articulating the precise qualities they grasp for this identification seems impossible. Stoic philosophy of language aligns with this view. According to it, proper names like Socrates have the role of revealing the individual's peculiar quality. No comprehensive list of appellations signifying common qualities such as snobness or boldness is meant to accomplish such a task. Thus, the issue with the Xippus's account is not the suggestion that peculiar qualities are constituted by combination of physical qualities, but rather the attempt to provide specific examples of such combinations. While useful for understanding the Stoic concept, his example mistakenly suggests that it is possible to provide a precise list of qualities constituting an individual's peculiar quality. On the contrary, the Stoics hold an individual's peculiar quality is only specified by his intrinsic suchness, like the intrinsic Socraticity of Socrates. In the next section, I will return to this notion of intrinsic suchness. For now, I would like to point out that this intrinsic suchness is what persists through an individual's lifetime. Further, this is what allows to identify the same individual despite changes in his physical qualities over time. However, given that peculiar qualities cannot be analyzable in terms of mere sums of physical qualities, the distinct character of this intrinsic suchness remains elusive. Thus, this intrinsic suchness embodies a distinct je ne sais quoi that a peculiarly qualified individual possesses. This is the reason why peculiar qualities can only be encoded in proper names. To conclude this first part, is worth nothing a potential challenge for the Stoic view. Since peculiar qualities are ultimately constituted by physical qualities, it remains unclear whether they can persist through extreme physical changes. Consider cases of individuals who have endured such a extreme physical trauma that even their mothers are unable to recognize them. I don't think the Stoics could easily address these cases. However, it doesn't mean that the Stoic view, according to the Xippus's account, is obviously problematic. In fact, they endeavor to account for certain features of the phenomenon of identification by deploying key concepts from their corporalist ontology. That said, Let us delve deeper into this interpretation by examining the Stoic solution to the problem of material constitution. So now I'm going to the second part. The problem of material constitution. The problem of material constitution inquires into the kind of relation that obtains between an object and the lump of matter it is made of. For instance, the relation between the statue and the lump of clay. The intuitive view is that this is an identity relation, for the object is nothing over and above the lump of matter. However, the so-called growing argument presents a challenge to this identity claim. On the face of it, the Stoics argue that an object cannot be merely identical to the lump of matter it is made of. However, this alternative view has a problematic consequence: the existence of coincident objects or collocate objects. Since an object is not identical to the lump of matter it is made of, there are two numerically distinct individuals that share the same color, the same shape, the same weight, and the same place. One, the peculiarly qualified individual, and is matter, which the Stoic called substance. In the following section, I will examine how the Stoic explain away the view that a peculiarly qualified individual is numerically distinct yet coincident object with his matter of substance. I will first examine how the growing argument raises the problem of material constitution. Then I will discuss the possibility of coincident objects in Stoicism. So, the growing argument. The growing argument is based on a classical puzzle attributed to the comic poet Epicharmus in the version of the debtor paradox. This puzzle was notably employed by the academic skeptics to challenge Stoic ontology. Plutarch presents the argument as follows. Text 4. For the argument is a simple one, and these people grant its premises. All particular substances are in flux and motion, releasing from some things from themselves and receiving others which reach them from elsewhere. The numbers or quantities which these are added or subtracted from don't remain in the same, but become different as the aforementioned arrivals and departures cause the substance to be transformed. The prevailing convention is wrong to call these processes of growth and decay. Rather, they should be called generation and destruction, since they transform the thing from what is into something else, whereas growing and diminishing are affections of a body which share as a substrate and persists. According to this argument, growing and diminishing are affections that requires a persistent bodily individual to undergo them. Moreover, these affections are quantitative changes that involve the addiction and subtraction of matter from the bodily individual. A further assumption is that lumps of matter have their parts necessarily. From these assumptions, the argument contends that this kind of change doesn't enable the persistence of any bodily individual. On the contrary, these changes lead to the successive generation and destruction of numerically distinct individuals. Hence, there is no persistent bodily individual that can undergo growing and diminishing. The growing argument raises the problem of persistence, how an individual can remain numerically identical despite undergoing material changes. However, this argument also raises a closely related problem, the problem of material constitution. I previously noted this problem inquires into the kind of relation that obtains between an object and the lump of matter it is made of. As the argument shows, to claim that this is an identity relation implies that both share the same persistent conditions. As a result, the bodily individual would seek to exist whenever undergoing material changes, giving rise to a new bodily individual made of a numerically distinct lump of matter. To preserve the persistence of bodily individuals, the Stoics decided to dismiss the claim that a bodily individual is identical to the lump of matter it is made of. However, this implies that there are two numerically distinct bodies occupying the same place and the same time, the bodily individual and the lump of matter. The existence of coincident objects has been regarded as highly impossible throughout the history of philosophy. Indeed, the academics consider it as absurd consequences of the Stoic response to a growing argument. So, text 5. When it's stated and proposed in such way, what is the judgment of these champions of the evident, these judges of our conceptions? That each of us is a pair of twins, two nature and double, knowing the way the poets think of the mullianity, joining some parts but separating others, but two bodies sharing the same color, the same shape, the same weight, and the same plate, yet nevertheless double, even though no man previously have seen them. But these men alone have seen this combination, this duplicity, this ambiguity that each of us is two substrates. The one substance, the other a peculiarly qualified individual, and that the one is always in flux and motion, neither growing nor diminishing, nor remaining as it is at all, while the other remains and grows and diminishing and undergoes all the positive affections to the first one, although his natural partner combining fuse with it and nowhere providing sense perception with a grasp of the difference. Yet, this difference and distinction in us, no one has marked off or discriminated, nor we have perceived that we are born double, always in flux with one part of ourselves, while remaining the same people from birth to death with the other. In their approach to the growing argument, the Stoics accept that the lump of matter, the bodily individual substance, cease to exist whenever it undergoes quantitative changes. Accordingly, it cannot undergo material changes of growing and diminishing. In contrast, the bodily individual, qua peculiarly qualified individual, persists through the quantitative changes of his matter. This persistence results from his possession of a peculiar quality, which remains stable from birth to death, even if his matter is constantly changing. For this reason, only peculiarly qualified individuals can undergo material changes of growing and diminishing. To explain how an individual can remain numerically identical despite physical changes, the Stoics made the case for the idea that a peculiarly qualified individual and his matter are two numerically distinct yet coincident bodily individuals. Their argument hinges on the principle that entities numerically identical are also qualitatively identical. Thus, if a peculiarly qualified individual and his matter have different properties, we are entitled to claim that they are not numerically identical. However, as the academics objected, our perception tells us that they share the same properties: color, shape, weight, and location. The Stoics reply to this objection as follows. To what corresponds to the peculiarly qualified individual is not the same what corresponds to the substance. Menes-Harkus said is clear. For things which are the same should have the same properties. For if, for the sake of the argument, someone were to mold a horse squashing, then make a dog, it would be reasonable for us on seeing this to say that this previously didn't exist, but now does exist. So what is said when it comes to the qualified thing is different. So too, in general, when it comes to substance, to hold that we are the same as our substance seems inconvincing. For it often comes about that the substance exists before something's generation. Before Socrates' generation, say, when Socrates doesn't yet exist, and that after Socrates' destruction, the substance remains, although he no longer exists. According to this text, the properties that distinguish a peculiarly qualified individual from his substance are modal and historical properties. Since the example relying on historical properties has certain complications, let us focus only on modal properties. The text claims that while a horse's substance could survive being squashed and subsequently remolded into a dog, the horse couldn't. As long as the quantity of matter remains unchanged, the underlying substance can survive even strange changes in the individual's qualities. In contrast, the peculiarly qualified individual couldn't survive this kind of change. Indeed, it cannot survive if its peculiar quality, and therefore the complex combination of its physical qualities, are completely destroyed. Thus, this difference in their persistent condition grants that they are not identical, even if they share the same color, shape, weight, and location. In their strategy to deal with the growing argument, the Stoics developed the controversial view that a peculiarly qualified individual and his underlying substance are two numerically distinct yet coincident bodily individuals. Now, let us see how they explain away this view. So, coincident objects. Scholars typically don't regard the Stoic acceptance of coincident objects as an issue. Drawing on their interpretation of the Stoic categories, they hold that a peculiarly qualified individual and his substance differ only in description. This means that they are not two numerically distinct yet coincident bodily individuals, but rather a single individual seen under two different descriptions. I concur with this view insofar as a peculiar qualified individual and his substance are separable only in thought. However, in my view, we still need to account for their difference, as this is what explains that a peculiarly qualified individual remains identical while his substance is always in flux. In other words, we must explain why the Stoics decided to carve up bodily individuals in such specific manner. We have another testimony on Chrysippus' response to the growing argument. Unfortunately, Chrysippus' argument, known as the puzzle of Dion and Theon, is incomplete. Despite that, the argument clearly centers on the Stoic thesis that it's impossible for two peculiarly qualified individuals to occupy the same substance jointly. My hypothesis is that this argument proves that what is really absurd is that two peculiarly qualified individuals occupy the same place at the same time. Because a peculiarly qualified individual and his underlying substance are not two peculiarly qualified individuals, they can coexist within the same lump of matter. Consequently, they share identical physical properties, including color, shape, weight, and location. In order to illuminate the constitutional relation that obtains between a peculiarly qualified individual and his substance, let us examine the following testimony. The substance neither grows nor diminishes through addition or subtraction, but simply alters, just as in the case of numbers and measures. And it follows that it is in the case of peculiarly qualified individuals, such as Dion and Theon, that processes of both growth and diminution arise. Therefore, each individual's quality actually remains from his generation to his destruction in the case of destructible animals, plants, and the like. In the case of peculiarly qualified individuals, they say that there are two receptive parts, the one pertaining on the presence of the substance, the other to the qualified individual. For it is the latter, as we have said several times, that is receptive of growth and diminution. The peculiarly qualified thing is not the same as its constituent substance, nor on the other hand is it different from it, but is merely not the same, in that the substance both is a part and it occupies the same place as it, whereas whether is called different from something must be separate from it and not be thought of as even a part of it. This test characterizes the constitutional relation as a kind of composition or mereological relation. In this relation, the peculiarly qualified individual is not numerically identical to its substance, but is not numerically distinct either. This is because they are coincident objects, although the substance is just a part of the peculiarly qualified individual. Consequently, the Stoics regard them as merely not identical. Given this idiosyncratic characterization, the question arises, what is the other part which, together with the substance, constitutes a peculiarly qualified individual? The answer to this question will rely on the nature of both peculiarly qualified individuals and their peculiar qualities. Since the peculiarly qualified individual and his substance are materially coincident, some might propose identify the other part with an incorporeal form-like entity. This aligns with the concept of substance understood as the unqualified matter that receives a peculiar quality to constitute a peculiarly qualified individual. This proposal, however, leads to an allomorphic interpretation. This is problematic because the Stoics developed an ontology that rejects incorporeal forms. Hence, my proposal involves identifying the other part with that which, in one way or another, serves the explanatory role of forms within the corporealist Stoic ontology. The following passage points in this direction. Text 8. The Stoics say that what is common to the quality which pertains to bodies is to be that which differentiates substance, not separable per se, but delimited by a concept and a peculiarity, and not specified by time or strength, but by the intrinsic exactness in accordance with which a qualified thing is generated. This text identifies two modes of qualification for bodily individuals: common qualification by concepts and peculiar qualification by peculiar qualities. Let us focus only on the latter. First, the text points out that a peculiar quality is not specified by time or strength. Is not specified by time because, as previously discussed, the physical qualities that constitute it change over time. The notion of strength, on the other hand, is linked to the Stoic account of qualities. According to it, a bodily individual has the specific qualities it exhibits because his pneuma holds a specific tension or tensility that provides unity and structure to its substance. Differences in this tension then ground the qualitative difference between both among peculiarly qualified individuals and within the same peculiarly qualified individual over time. Thus, an individual's physical qualities change over time as his pneuma's tension changes. Second, this text points out that a peculiar quality is only specified by the extrinsic suchness in accordance with which a peculiarly qualified individual is generated. This remark points to a key concept of Stoic cosmology and biology: seminal principles. They represent the rational principle or God, which, embodied in all bodily individuals, qualify their matter. As such, seminal principle rational govern the tension of bodily individuals' pneuma. Both synchronically and diachronically, following a rational path of development, his ontogenesis. This suggests that the other part which, together with the substance, constitute a peculiar qualified individual is the seminal result embodied in it. Indeed, some testimonies hold that they are precisely what replaces the explanatory role of form within Stoic ontology. The previous remark allows us to understand the constitutional relation that obtains between a peculiarly qualified individual and his substance. Peculiarly qualified individuals are not merely lumps of matter, but peculiarly qualified lumps of matter. This explains why they are not identical to the underlying substance, which, when considered separately in thought, is simply a specific quantity of matter. However, they are not numerically distinct either. This is because when considered together as a peculiarly qualified individual, the seminal principle and the underlying substance are mutually interpenetrated bodies with other materials part completely overlapping. This allows for the peculiar qualified individual and his substance to coexist in the same lump of matter and consequently to share the same physical qualities. But since the peculiar qualified individual additionally possesses a rational principle that provides it with a persistent peculiar quality, it is the only one that can survive physical changes. What ultimately allows for coincident objects is the possibility of mutually interpenetrated bodies, which is a key feature of the Stoic concept of body and their theory of blending. Setting aside these crucial elements of Stoic ontology, the key insights obtained from the Stoic solution to the problem of material constitution are: the constitution relation obtaining between a peculiarly qualified individual and his substance is such that they are coincident objects sharing all their physical properties. However, this relation allows the former to survive changes in these properties, but not the latter. And this is because peculiarly qualified individuals additionally possess a rational principle that endows them with a lifelong persistent quality. Let us conclude by examining how these insights are connected to those we discussed in the first part of the paper. So this is also the more hypothetical part of my paper, the way to combine the insights of both parts. So let's see. In this paper, I examine how the Stoic concept of peculiarly qualified individual and peculiar quality address both the epistemological challenges of identification and the metaphysical problem of material constitution. In doing so, I propose an interpretation of these concepts. To conclude, I will lay out the key aspects of the interpretation developed in this paper. An individual's peculiar quality is constituted by the complex combination of his physical qualities. However, this is a constituted whole that cannot be reduced to a mere sum of physical qualities. This fact allows the peculiar quality to persist even though its constituent elements change over time. This fact is just the effect of the constitution relation obtaining between a peculiarly qualified individual and the lump of matter it is made of. Underlying the physical changes a peculiarly qualified individual undergoes is a substance that, after each change, perishes and gives rise to a numerically distinct lump of matter. In this way, the identity of each successive lump of matter depends on the mere sum of physical qualities possessed by a peculiarly qualified individual at any given time. For this reason, a peculiarly qualified individual, which is a persistent bodily individual, cannot be identical to the lump of matter it is made of, despite they are coincident objects that share the same sum of physical qualities. In contrast, the identity of peculiarly qualified individuals depends on the constituted whole that remains identical to the physical changes his underlying substance cannot persist. The persistence of this complex whole, identical to an individual's peculiar quality, is due to the seminal principles that are completely interpenetrated with its underlying substance. These reasons make the constituent elements of the complex whole, an individual's peculiar physical qualities, change according to a rational structure or ratio. This ensures that individuals' physical qualities change in a gradual and orderly manner, enabling the identification of the same individual over time. In this way, seminal principles establish the continuity of successive lumps of matter, linking them to the same peculiarly qualified individual. Thus, peculiar qualities as complex whole are rational structure of physical qualities. One can grasp these rational structures through perceptual representations. However, given that they are not irreducible to mere sums of physical properties, their unique character remains elusive, so it can be only specified to a proper name. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christian, for this theoretic presentation. Now we have the machine for 8 minutes for discussion. So, questions?
Right, so thank you, Christian. I'm thinking whether your proposal of reading the peculiar quality as not as a single trait, but rather as a complex whole, whether that could include some other types of traits and not only physical. And I'm thinking psychological traits or relational traits. And I'm asking this because your proposal starts by saying that some scholars think that the peculiar quality could be a psychological trait or a relational trait or a physical one. And so you want to contend that it is the physical one based on the synthesis text. But as I see I reckon it was Seneca's fragment with the example of the egg and the twins. The reason why the farmer can distinguish between the two eggs is because this egg was laid by this hen and not by the other, and I would take that is a relational type of trait. And maybe something similar is happening with the twins, because being twins is also a relational trait, and I take it that is part of their identity. And I reckon they also mention that they are sons of some man. I cannot remember his name. So the father of the twins is so and so and so. I take it that is also an important feature of how you manage to identify this person and this other person. And so what I'm thinking is, could it be that the reading you are proposing, namely this complex whole of different traits, could it be that, could you expand that so as to include other types of traits in cases where it is applicable, So I would assume that for an egg you wouldn't include psychological traits maybe, but for a person maybe you can. And so the synthesis fragment is maybe not meant to contend that the qualities they are after ought to be physical, but maybe it's meant to show like a model on how you should take into account different types of properties and create this whole. Does that make sense?
Well, the reason why I focus only on physical qualities is just because those are the more problematic ones, and those are the one mentioned in the Xippos' account. So some people think that since physical traits cannot be the peculiar qualities of an object, they propose other alternatives like psychological qualities. So, I agree that it's possible to include psychological properties, but only on beings with soul, because this account is supposedly to work not only with animals or humans, but also with eggs and plants, which don't have psychological qualities. So if we find a way to say that psychological qualities are perceptible, but I think there are some sources that say that. But I think that I agree with you that I can expand this to cover psychological qualities, but if we assume that we can perceive those qualities, or that they are perceptible, or epistemic accessible in some way. Yeah, but given that I'm focused, or my view aim to apply not only to beings with psychological threats, that's what I avoid mentioning these qualities. But that's perfect. Okay, thank you.
You are number 3?
I'm 3.
Okay. I think that we're going for some similar things, and I'll talk about that after lunch. So I just had a couple of clarificatory questions to try and understand the view. So I'm not totally clear on what the constituted whole is, but at some point it seemed like you said something about it being because of the constitution relation. Can you say a little bit more about that? And then related to that, I'm trying to understand how the seminal reason comes in. And then just a couple more after you say, like just trying to understand.
Okay. Yeah, basically, as I said, that's my working hypothesis. I'm not quite sure, but my hypothesis was like, given that physical qualities or the sum of physical qualities change over time, I need to find like a sort of ontological relation between the physical qualities, the sums of physical qualities, with the other thing that remains, or the other thing that persists, which I think is the peculiar quality. So my intuition was that it could be the same kind of relation, or at least reflects in some way this constitution relation that is discussed in the second part. Yeah, that's basically my intuition behind this.
And so another thing you seem to be treating the constitutional relation like the blending relation a little bit, in terms of them both being cases of co-location, but those seem to be different kinds of co-location. So the question I'm asking is really just about the kind of constitution relation you have in mind, because when two bodies blend, that's two bodies that come to be in the same place. But the relation between the lump of clay and the statue seems to be a different kind of co-location. And so I'm just curious if you could say maybe now just a little bit more about what exactly the constitution relation is and how it makes for this constituted whole that is the thing that persists. Is that right?
Okay, because the constitutional relation is a one-to-one relation, is because of that.
That's right, but I don't think that's what you're saying. But it does just seem like the relationship between two bodies blended is different from the relationship between, or maybe this is one of my other questions. I wonder if your rational structure or the seminal reason is meant to be equated with the poem. No, good, okay, yeah.
No, I'm aware of this problem that you mentioned, mostly because I read your paper and I'm agree with most of the things that you said. But what I'm trying to do here is, after discussing this text, which mentioned that there is one part, there are two parts, at least two parts, the substance and something else. I was looking what could be this other part, but in a way that it can be a composition relation.
Right.
I know that the part who talk could be a little bit confusing because, constitution is not usually presented as a composition relation. So I was trying to make, okay, it must be a part, but not in the sense of a composition. It must be something else that is embodied in the constituted whole that is there, but I'm not sure what it must be, to be honest. But I don't believe that is some form or incorporeal thing.
Well, I really appreciate that you're seeing that treating the syndrome as a complex is part of the problem. So we'll talk about later.
Okay, thanks.
Please.
Thank you so much. Such an interesting paper. Well, one thing I wanted to say that might be just helpful that you can think about, instead of thinking of the qualities as constituting a whole, which is the peculiar quality, that's how you phrased it, right? Like the physical qualities constitute a whole, that is the peculiar quality. You might borrow some language from philosophy of science and say like it's a homeostatic property cluster where some properties can fall out, but the cluster remains the same somehow. I don't know. You might look into it. It might be helpful. In any case, I was also curious about some things that Vanessa was curious about. What is the relation between the spermatocoid logoi and the peculiarly qualified individual? What's the mereological or constitutive relationship between the peculiarly qualified thing and the spermatocoid logoi, according to you?
Yeah, basically what I think is that the thing that determine our peculiar qualities is those principles. So the thing that you have certain peculiar quality is in virtue of having some certain seminal reasons, basically. So I was thinking what could be that is different in the peculiarly qualified individual that can persist. So I was thinking that behind the lump of matter is like a rational principle that governs the development of the individual. But I is still not quite sure about calling this rational principle, as the previous question was. I don't know whether what kind of metaphysical relation could be there. Because I agree that it's not a composition relation, is not a matter and seminal reason being combined in the peculiarly qualified individual, but this basically my hypothesis that it must be something related to constitution relation. But as I said, I still need to see how.
Because the issue would be if they're bodies, or if it's a body, right, and it's in the purely qualified individual, along with the substance, then it would be very difficult for the substance to think about how the substance could be coincident with the purely qualified individual, because it would crowd out the spermatocoid logoi, right?
Sorry, how was that?
So I assume that it's very hard to formulate coincidence in Stoic physics, but one potential way to do is to say that a body is coincident with another body if any corporeal partition of the first body is also a corporeal partition of the second body, right?
Okay.
And so if the substance is coincident with the purely qualified individual, in common language, I would just say they have all the same material parts. But in Stoicism, I might try to say something like, any corporeal partition of the peculiarly qualified individual is a partition of the substance. But now if I try to throw in the spermatocoid logoi into that, it looks like it doesn't have any room to play the role of a part, at least, of the peculiarly qualified individual. So that's one reason to maybe not phrase it that way, unless we could formulate coincidence a bit differently that allows for that.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Sure. What I agree, and I'm perfectly aware of that, is that what I cannot say is that seminal principles are, as the way I understand it in this aspect, I'm not adding the matter, right? What I'm saying is that one hypothesis that I had at the beginning was to think that what is added is pneuma, in addition to the matter of the body. But of course, pneuma has matter too, so it changed too. So it must be the lump of matter or the substance must be the combination of our body and the matter of our as pneuma, right? So they can be, the seminal principle cannot be another material entity coming into the substance, right? But what I'm trying to figure out how why this other part is called a part, right? Because this is the way it is presented in the text, that is a parthood relation.
Can you just say again which text that says that? Is it the Dactygonoria?
Yes. Let me see. Text 7. Text 7, Instaverus at the end.
Yeah, and, what page is that on, what you're looking at?
13. 13.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think you're doing a noble job trying to make sense of that. Yeah, I agree. That's very good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Number 4. Yes.
Okay, yeah, thank you, President. Yes, I mean, I had a lot of trouble trying to understand what was, the role of the seminal principle. So because, I mean, you say it's not a quality, right? Because the seminal reason is not a quality. We agree with that. So, but is it a body? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, and it is not accessible observationally. Yes. So, and the quality and the peculiar quality then is a whole constituted by a body and observational quality. Is that it?
Sorry, how?
Yeah, the peculiar quality. What is the peculiar quality? Because I mean, we were trying to see what was the peculiar quality, right? That was so your proposal is that it is a whole. I mean, it's a sum of physical qualities structured in a certain way.
Yes.
So it's a whole, but the logos is part of that whole. Yes. So it's a whole constituted by a body and certain qualities, right?
It's a body qualified in some way, in some specific way.
Yeah.
But it's not a quality anymore. Or is it?
Which thing?
The peculiar quality.
No, it's a peculiar qualified individual, that it is the composition of the body with some peculiar qualities. And the second ones are physical qualities of that body, person, the boldness of Socrates.
Okay, and so the idea is that there's something.
Sufficient for human and poietis.
Yes, it is okay. And so what is doing the job there is something that is structural, and it is not observational. It's not qualitative. Okay. And so what is the difference between that view and saying that that Socratiety, and it's just like some kind of anxiety, like the medieval, like saying like it's some kind of non-qualitative trait or something like that. What would be your view on the difference between what Stoics says? Because I mean, when I have thought about Stoics before, the idea was going to be that there was just some. I mean, the explanation was going to be qualitative in some sense, right? But now, I'm unsure about that point. If you want to explain it a bit more.
Which point exactly?
Yeah, how is it that the account is qualitative anymore? And not just saying, well, it's just something non-qualitative there, like a anxiety that distinguishes these two twins, right? One has this anxiety and the other has this anxiety. They're just two non-qualitative traits.
Okay.
So what is the difference then in the Stoic view? It's different between the two twins, let's say.
Okay. Basically, let me start by mentioning basically my problem. My problem is that is with the Xippus' text, right, which mentioned those physical qualities. And they related it with the peculiarly qualified individual, right? Like life, if it were a sort of combination of physical qualities. So what I was trying to do is to find a way to explain how peculiar qualities can persist, even if these physical qualities change over time. So my hypothesis is that behind these physical qualities, there is a sort of a structure, a sort of as unique structure, but that put these properties in certain way that allow me to identify an individual. And also that this structure in some way remain through the lifetime of the individual as a sort of rational pattern of change. But the specific nature of what is this something else, you said that can be a quality for something or what?
Yes, I was thinking that. So the idea is that the peculiar quality are just the quality with a certain structure, right?
Yeah.
The whole. Okay, no, I'm just trying to understand that. Okay.
Thanks. Is there a follow-up?
No.
Okay. Thank you very much. It was very stimulating. What I'm wondering is, do you need the Xippus to make your argument? The reason why I'm asking this is that it's debated in the literature whether the Xippus is actually considering the Stoic view in this passage. And I think there are reasons to think it is not, because, well, this has been argued extensively by Caprio Giardon. I mean, he's a paper on the Xippus and on this passage of the Xippus, arguing that he's actually addressing Porphyry. And there are passages in the Isagoge where Porphyry speaks about the aphorisma idioteton, right? So he seems to have a view of individual substances that blend together views of Stoic and Aristotelian provenance. So it may well be the case that Xippus is not presenting at all the Stoic view. So you don't need to defend the Xippus from the charge that is misrepresenting the Stoics because it's not talking about the Stoics.
Okay.
He's probably talking about Platonist / Aristotelian appropriation of the Stoic view. So I'm wondering, but this would leave untouched the fact that your account may hold for the Stoics. What I'm urging caution about is to present your view as a defense of the Xippus take or alleged take on the Stoic view of the idios poion. Just one point. To say, as some have done, that the mentioning of idios poion at line 23 of the Xippus passage is enough to believe that he's thinking about the Stoics seems to me weak, because I mean, he can use Stoic terminology freely. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. To be honest, I wasn't aware of that part about the Xippus text. But yeah, basically, even if I reject this text, what I want to present is the idea that physical qualities can play the role in some way, this role of peculiar qualities, although they are related in some way with peculiar qualities. Because this is what makes sense, in my opinion, of the epistemological debate, right? Given as the epistemological debate is presented, it must be something related with physical qualities in some sense or other. And I was seeing the epistemological debate is a way to say, well, this highly controversial Dexippus text can be the truly Stoic view in a way that it mentioned the kind of properties that can be used in the phenomenon of identification. But yeah, sure. I think that I don't need this highly controversial test. I think that you should agree with you. Thank you.
Let me give you a number again, number 6, 7, and 8. Please.
Oh, thanks. I mean, mostly I'm just puzzling other people, and because the problem that you're working through, I think, is what I'm also trying to work through. And maybe this is already what people are getting at, but it feels like there's something intuitively right about this idea of this spermaticos logos in terms of the physical cause, but it doesn't seem to belong to the analysis of the categories. It seems to be just mixing this metaphysical account and a physical account. And so if we were trying to think about it, and there are people here who could say more about that, it's a problem I'm trying to work through too, but that feels like the problem. And so if we shift it over to, well, what is the physical account of how an individual persists through time, then it would seem to be what you're talking about, mutually interpenetrated bodies, and these kinds of questions must be something like the hegemonicon in a particular relation to its body. And where, we know that is that the definition of a constitution might be the hegemonicon in a particular relation to the body, such that they then can actually interpenetrate and interact and realize a particular form of life. And that's how, in ichiosis, I can perceive I'm a human, self-perception, and I can realize a certain form of life because of the question of fate, and this is a question different from epistemology. Like, my life is actually not just a form of life, it's a given life, so it's a biographical account such that the specificity of my life. But this is taking us farther away from the question of the qualified individual and the epistemological, but they do seem to govern something about how something really specific unfolding from a seed is going to be implemented in a given individual. I mean, it seems that's important to understanding how the life of the cosmos unfolds as a spermaticos logos that's unfolding through the relationship of the hegemonicon to its substance or its body. So that feels like where we should be in trying to work that out. But I'm not sure. I don't know what you think about that or other people, but this question of where it belongs in the mixture seems to just be in a different place.
Regarding the seminal principles?
Yeah, the seminal principles seem to just be over in the physics in terms of how one realizes one's life as a particular person over time as a relationship of hegemonicon and body, unfolding in a particular way.
Well,
Sorry, one other, there's that, I don't have it, it's from Seneca, I can find it, where he talks about how this
seed of the cosmos unfolding to the point of conflagration, he likens it to a seed in a human being working on the matter and unfolding that life over time. Anyways, this is where it seems to belong.
Yeah. I still need to work more on this notion of seminal principles, because as you said, it was at the end of my working hypothesis in the part where what could be this other part, right? I guess it might be the seminal principle, given that some other author use them to say that this playing the role of forms in Stoic ontology. But I agree with the idea that there is not, at least in this case that I'm studying, is not the case of composition, right? The idea that we are composed of both matter, the body of our matter and our soul. There is also a body that with some combination provides the unity of a entity. What I think is that this is not the case that I'm going to explain here, right? I mean, this notion of combination of two things. But I think that after the combination, there are still the seminal principles giving or provide the body with form or with this rational pattern constitution. But after the combination of the two principles in one thing. Yeah, I don't know if that helps. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just a couple of questions, but I can start with just one. It's this, I want to know, well, the Stoics seem to identify the peculiar quality with a quality, apoyo, and to regard the peculiarly qualified individual as a body qualified, as a apoyo. So my question is this, is why do you think they regard the peculiar quality as a quality and not as a different kind of property, which is not a quality? Or is the idea that quality here is used in the broad sense to refer to a property? The reason I ask is this, is that there is a difference between qualities in the proper sense and other properties which are non-qualitative. For example, when you are sitting or when you are standing or walking, what explains that you are walking is not a quality that you have, but it may be a quality that you have that explains that you are sweating, or that you are maybe you feel dizzy and the color changes of your face. Well, these may be caused by the presence of a certain quality in you, namely whiteness. That's an example. But when you walk, what explains that you walk is not a quality, is a disposition, no? And that's why they classify the walking person as a post-echon, no? Rather than as a qualified, although there is some discussion about what is a quality in Stoicism, no? And there are some uses of quality in Stoicism that they encompass many things, no? And including dispositions. So my question is this, no? I mean, when they say that quality, that the peculiar quality, what distinguishes a person from another person, no? When they use the term, the concept of quality in this claim, do they mean quality in the narrow sense as opposed to disposition? Or they mean quality in the broad sense, and they do not exclude that maybe the peculiar quality is not a quality in the narrow sense, but something that could be, for example, a disposition like walking or things like that, so it's the concept of quality that is implied in the thesis that there is a particular quality. So that's the question, not the first question.
Okay. Yeah, I believe that it has to be the specific sense of quality, right? Because in the second genre of the categories are qualified individuals, and in this is divided into peculiarly qualified individuals and commonly qualified individuals. So it must be, I think, a quality in this sense, in the narrow sense. Which doesn't imply that properties could be the result of the disposition of our pneuma, for example.
No, of course.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, and that's the only one after there is time. But there is no time. Yes. So yes, the other question is, I mean, I'm not sure about how you handle the growing argument and the reply to the growing argument. So I think that you say, and I agree with this, that the Stoic reply to the growing argument is that that we shouldn't identify an individual particularly qualified with its substance or matter. And then this allows them to escape a paradoxical conclusion of the growing argument. But does this move of not identifying the peculiarly qualified individual with its matter, his or her matter, is that move, and does it imply, or is it consistent with saying that then you can have two peculiarly qualified in the same substance? I mean, if the peculiarly qualified individual is its substance, then you cannot have two peculiarly qualified in one single substance. But if they are not the same, then you can have many peculiarly qualified individuals in the same substance, as the theory of blending seems to require, where you can have two peculiarly qualified individuals occupying the same place, the same substance, the same, no? So how I mean, is it correct? I mean, do they? Is the reply to the growing argument consistent, or does it imply or necessitates the theory of blending? Okay. Or is it just consistent with, or is it inconsistent with the theory of blending? That's a point that I don't quite get.
Interesting. I hadn't thought about it, but I guess that there are two different I think, parts of the Stoic ontology. I mean, there are different theories. Yeah.
But are they consistent with one another?
Let me see. I think yes, because in the blending, as you say, we have two peculiarly qualified individuals, right? But each of them has their own substance previously the blending. So at the end, he's going to be in the same plane at the same time and sharing the same substance. Yes. But after the combination, we have a new bodily individual, right? A new peculiarly qualified individual, or not?
You mean the result of the blending?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. I mean, the result is a new individual, but the two previous individuals are there too.
Yes. But that's not exactly what I think is in the argument, because in the argument what we have is the same matter, and one is a peculiarly qualified individual and the other is only the matter.
Yes.
That doesn't have any peculiar qualities of their own.
Exactly. So what I was trying to do is to identify what is different, what else is in the matter that make is qualified, but without presupposing an allomorphic interpretation.
No, I think was really, I wonder if on how the epistemology works on your account. And so if we take the mother that in Alaway distinguishes her from twins, what exactly is she grasping on your view to infallibly do so? What is the content of her understanding? And is it exhausted by the current instance of grasping, or is it something more involving expertise or some sort of causal history? How exactly does the cognition work?
What I believe is that we need to pay more attention to the epistemological debate, because I think it's one part that is not usually considered when we study these concepts. And I think that is clearly the concept that appeared in the debate. So basically what I think is that one of the conditions a cognitive representation must meet is to grasp these peculiar qualities. But my point is that you can tell what exactly is the thing that you're grasping. And I think that the phenomenon of identification supports that idea in some sense, because we don't, as I said, point out the specific quality that allow you to identify or distinguish it between two entities. So basically, that's what I think, that we need to grasp those peculiar qualities, and this is a requirement for having a cognitive representation. And of course, it must require a concept of acquisition in some way, yeah.
Right, so we can't point it out, and it's never real, as far as it's something that's sort of chronic, as it were. Like to take an example, it's some sort of cluster concept or something like that. Right. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Some yes, something. But you can grasp it in some point of the time. For example, now I can grasp it for some reason, your Christianity. But then you can change rightly, and I lost my ability to identify you, even if I grasped it in a previous point of our relationship. Maybe because it seems like you cannot take it, but you can lose it if you can change your peculiar qualities, not in the extreme to become another Christian, but just in a point that, for example, if I return to Colombia and then I see you in 20 years, I can lose that ability. No, that's possible. Or once I obtain it, once I grasp it, I cannot lose it.
I think it's possible. But it's also possible that you can identify me, right?
Like the example of the mother. The
Yeah.
mother that cannot identify even so.
I say so because one important, I don't know how important, but one important part of my argument is that you can identify an individual over time because there are those peculiar properties there, and that there are there even if you can point out what are those exactly. And what I was thinking, it must be like this rational structural change, so you can completely change, I mean, in a drastic and significant way that I can't identify you. Yeah.
I think we can stop here. They're all very angry. So thank you very much.